Hi, everyone out there in Supernal Land. It's wonderful to see you again. And today we have a very special guest once more with us, Dr. Samir Osmanagich, who is a scientist, anthropologist, has published 22 books, numerous peer-reviewed papers. He has discovered the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun and the greater complex around it. And that is his claim to fame in this lifetime, what he is well known for. And we're very excited to have you with us again today, Dr. Sam. Welcome.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for this beautiful introduction. I'm very happy to be with you again. Yeah.
I'm very excited about today's topic and also the one upcoming. I'm very excited about these. This is just my jam. Today, we're going to be following on from our series. We have been down the rabbit hole of who is Dr. Sam. We've been learning all about the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. We've also looked at the multidisciplinary way in which you work with incredible people from all around the world to further the knowledge about not just the archaeology of the site, but also of all of the energies and things that come with it. It's very exciting stuff. And today we're going down the rabbit hole of sacred geometry at the Bosnian Pyramid site. So I'd like to start out, Dr. Sam, by just referencing that we're talking about not just a sacred site, but a sacred complex. And we're talking about sacred geometry, and there's a correlation between those two terms in that the sacredness is there. So I was wondering if you could speak to the deeper meaning of that correlation and how that relationship transposes at the Bosnian Pyramid Complex.
Yes, gladly. Sacred geometry and sacred site, it's not the same thing. Sacred sites are some special, unique sites from the ancient history, usually megalithic or pyramid sites. And those sites were always built at the places with the special energies, energetically very potent places. And then the purpose of those structures, pyramids or megalithic circles, would be to amplify the energy. And then once you have the abundance of the energy, that can be used for the healing, water or food, molecular structure improvement, immunity, development of spiritual senses. So this is for me sacred site. Sacred geometry is something different. Sometimes it comes with the sacred sites, sometimes thanks to the sacred geometry elements, the site becomes energetically very powerful. What are the elements of sacred geometry? The ancient builders knew the power of certain geometrical shapes. For example, triangles, but not any triangle, but one very specific, which is called the equilateral triangle. The triangle that has three same length sides, three times inner angles at 60 degrees. Why is that so important? 3 points in space you can connect in unlimited ways, but only one gives you equilateral triangle. The next element of sacred geometry is hexagonal shape. Hexagon, 6 angles, they are all the same. They basically consist of 6 equilateral triangles, 2D and 3D. Equilateral triangle is a symbol for the pyramid. So it is like you have 6 pyramids. And this shape is the most powerful when it comes to the energy. The next element of sacred geometry, the flower of life. In most cases, it is hexagonal, but it can be also octagonal or some other shapes. Why flower of life? Because you have those circles, the same radius, and the layout of certain objects, monuments, pyramids, If they follow the flower of life, it adds to the energy amplifying aspect. But probably the most important element of sacred geometry is the Fibonacci spiral. So, the previous elements are part of the linear geometry, which is based on straight lines. Sometimes you have simply straight line where you have objects, 3, 4, or 5 of them on one straight line. Sometimes you have equilateral triangle. Sometimes you have flower of life, which is also based on equilateral triangle. But spiral geometry is something different. Namely, Fibonacci spiral is so important for all living beings, for the universe, that we can find the Fibonacci spiral from micro to the macro world. For example, you take a look at the seashells, you can see this beautiful spiral. Or you take tropical storm, you start from the eye of the storm, and I've heard that the storm is coming to Perth. You take from the eye of the storm, you have the spiral, which basically gives you the boundaries, how the storm will be progressing. Or take our face. You start from our lips, the spiral goes to the tip of our nose, intersects with the chin, and goes all the way to our forehead. Take our fingers. Each finger has 3 bones. This is the longest bone, the medium size, and the small one. The longest is bigger than medium for 1.618 times. And later on, I'm going to explain why this number is important. Number phi. And 2 most important numbers are number pi, 3.14, and number phi, 1.618. So, medium bone is bigger than the small one for 1.618 times. In order to create the Fibonacci spirals, you need 2 things. The first one is 1.618, number phi, or golden section, golden ratio, and the other one is Fibonacci sequence or Fibonacci numbers. What are those numbers? 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 36, and so on. How do you get those numbers? Well, what you do, you add 2 previous numbers, let's say 1 and 2, and you are getting the third one. 1 plus 2 equals 3. And then 2 plus 3 equals 5. 3 plus 5 equals 8. 5 plus 8, 13, and so on. And then 13 and 21, those 2 numbers, when you divide 21 by 13, the result is 1.618 times. So now we see that there is some connection between those numbers, Fibonacci sequence and golden ratio. So how do you get the Fibonacci spiral out of that? Now, I mentioned number 1. You make a square, 1 by 1 by 1 by 1. The next one is 2. 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. The next one is 3 by 3 by 3 by 3. And then 5 by 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. So what happens there? When you go from one corner, 1 by 1, to another corner, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 5 by 5, 8 by 8, 13, 21, then you are getting perfectly precise, thematically precise spiral that opens exponentially. Now, this spiral, like I said, we can see everywhere in the world. Humans, animals, flowers, sunflower, storms, spiral galaxies. It seems to me like the universal mind, the creator, was using the movement of the energy following the Fibonacci spiral, creating all the visible world, not only on our planet, but everywhere else. So it is like it is a cosmic harmony, cosmic balance, the cosmic dance. So now, these are the elements of sacred geometry. And guess what? We can see those elements, sometimes individually, and sometimes almost all of them, like in the case of Bosnian pyramids. How do we see them? Let's say I mentioned number pi 3.14. Let's go to Egypt, the Giza pyramids, and the Great Pyramid of Egypt, the most famous in the world. The length of the sides at the base is 230 meters, 33. Two sides, 460.66. We divide it with the height, 146.6. The result is 3.14. So number pi is incorporated in the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Interesting thing though, the mainstream archaeologists and historians claim that this pyramid was built by the fourth dynasty pharaoh Khufu or Cheops. But guess what? Khufu, who ruled 4,550 years back, during his time, they did not know about the number pi. Him and thousands of slaves, like they tried to convince us, who built Great Pyramid of Egypt, they had no clue about this number, about this proportion. Only 2,000 years later, with the ancient Greek mathematician, humanity learned about approximate value of number pi, and only in the 17th century we got the precise value of number pi. Of course, I did mention in the previous episode that my stand is that the Great Pyramid of Egypt and 28 biggest stone monumental pyramid on Egyptian soil were built much, much, much before, probably between 30 and 40,000 years back, by more advanced civilizations. So that was the number pi. Now, you also asked me about the connection with the Bosnian pyramids. So if you agree, I can go with the linear and spiral geometry, elements of sacred geometry, and their
Beautiful.
connection with the pyramids. So from early days, back in 2005, 2006, we noticed that three major pyramids in Bosnia, the Bosnian pyramids of the Sun, Moon, and Dragon. Then on topographic map, you connect those three tops. The distance between them is approximately 2.1 kilometer. Basically, you are getting an equilateral triangle. It cannot be coincidence. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, even though it is covered by soil and vegetation, displays four triangular faces, four corners, perfect orientation to the cardinal points, east, west, north, and south. The same thing goes for the Moon and the Dragon Pyramid. And now we have equilateral triangle. Mother Nature does not make hills with the four sides and perfect orientation and then put them in a ratio of the equilateral triangle. So, as early as 2005, we were aware of this very important element of sacred geometry. But in the meantime, as we were expanding our research, we realized that other pyramid summits also displays very important features. For example, when you connect the top of the Pyramid of Dragon, Temple of Mother Earth, and the Moon Pyramid, it's perfectly straight line. When you connect the top of Temple of Mother Earth and Pyramid of Love and Sun and entrance to underground world, the complex of underground tunnels, again, perfectly straight line. So obviously, the ancient pyramid builders were taking great care about the layout, about how they are going to position those structures. And then when you take the first triangle, Sun, Moon, Dragon, and when you make a circle touching those three summits, and you take the same radius circle, but you start from the center, the circle goes from center, top of the Moon, top of the Dragon, center. Another one, center,
Sure.
top of the dragon, top of the moon, center. Another one, center, sun, moon, center. Basically, you are getting those 6 beautiful circles that create the flower of life. And so far, we have discovered not one, but 3 flowers of life in the Bosnian Valley of the Pyramids. But then the most exciting, I think, came when we started discovering the Fibonacci spirals. We started from the top of the Pyramid of Love in the Bosnian Valley of the Pyramids. And then, once you start drawing the Fibonacci spiral, the line intersects with the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, Temple of Mother Earth, Dragon Pyramid, goes all the way to the summit of the cumulus. Cumulus in archaeology is the artificially made conical hill, like rounded hill. This is where the spiral stops. And then we have another one and another one. And so far we have discovered 13 Fibonacci spirals in the Valley of Pyramids that include the pyramid summits. We have 6 pyramids, mouth of 2 rivers. Very important point. Why? Because when water moves, it is kinetic energy. Water moves, releases beneficial negative ions that help us prevent health issues or that help us healing. And then water is life. So mouth of 2 rivers is very important point. And then we have entrance to the underground tunnels, and we have not 1 tumulus, not 2 tumuli, but we have about 6, 7 intriguing pyramid hills. They all look like tumuli. So once we realize that this huge complex follow the element of sacred geometry, then we can become aware how the ancients were so careful about the layout. If we could see, unfortunately we cannot, the movement of the energy field, looking from above, we could see how the energy constantly moved within the valley of the pyramids in Bosnia. And our conclusion, the pyramid building and most of the megalithic sites were not for the funerary purposes, were not for the religious purposes. They were about
Energy.
the energy. And look at us, Freya, in 21st century. Everything is about the energy. You don't need
That's
to
right.
go to Hormuz Strait and Iran war and so on. It's about energy. Look at us now. We talk over the internet and the mobile phones and laptops. It requires energy. Our cars, energy. Electricity, TV, energy. When we eat, energy source. Everything is about the energy in our life. But the ancients were smart. They made construction complex, so they had initial investment. And after that, this complex would produce energy by itself. And the very important element that this complex works is the sacred geometry. And therefore, thanks to the sacred geometry, but also some energy potent places, Bosnian Valley of the Pyramids has become the sacred site.
Extraordinary. I feel like you've answered like half my questions in one answer, which is so normal when I'm talking to you. Now, this is fascinating because we're talking about something that's extremely difficult to do. Now, we don't have the capabilities in this day and age to create pyramids in the way that they were done 30,000 years ago in Bosnia. We know that. But the level of skill that it would take, and also there's two things you've mentioned. You know, we're talking about straight lines, and look at the country, the terrain there. It's not flat. You know, it's hilly. Apart from the structures themselves, I can't see that being any kind of easy feat to create. Do you consider that an overhead view would have been helpful in the construction of that? Um, Given we're talking about how energies move, and do you consider that perhaps it would have been a maybe an above and on ground team that was creating something of that nature?
Basically, you are asking me about the capabilities of the builders, who the civilization was. I've been researching pyramids for the last 4 decades, and I have realized more I research, more I investigate, more I travel, more pyramids I see, I know less and less. If you ask me the basic questions like who built Egyptian pyramids, I can honestly tell you I don't know.
Mm.
Of course, I know about the bedtime stories, pyramids built by the pharaohs of third, fourth, fifth, sixth dynasty, thousands of slaves, but it doesn't make no sense because they did not have tools, transportation means, knowledge, astronomical, calendar, mathematical, geometrical principles. They simply did not. Now, the next question, when they were built? In most cases, we don't know. In Bosnia, actually, we've done more radiocarbon dating and luminescence analysis and uranium thorium analysis than any other projects in the world. So we are rather confident to claim they are a little bit older than 30,000 years. In Egypt, we don't have a good information. They did only 4 dating on Great Pyramid, and all 4 were much older than the era of the pharaoh Khufu or Cheops, 4,550. And then they stopped because everything they claimed was obviously wrong.
Mm.
So that was the second question in archaeology. When? The third one is how. Indeed, how? How will somebody like in Egypt or China or Mexico shape granite stone or in Bolivia, Tijuanaco, when the only tools until a couple of thousand years back were primitive, soft copper tools? Today we use the diamond tools to cut granite. What did they use? We don't know. And then the transportation. The biggest block in Khufu pyramid is 80 tons granite from Aswan, which is 869 kilometers to the south, or 500 miles. The biggest one in Khafre, the second largest pyramid, is 220 tons.
Mm.
And then in Luxor, 300 kilometers away from the Aswan, you have obelisk, which is 375 tons. And in Aswan itself, we have unfinished obelisk, which is 1,250 tons. Now, you're right, 1,000 tons. We cannot now move from Aswan all the way to Cairo or Giza Plateau. You cannot, that's 1,000 tons. Cutting, we can cut it. Now, building the pyramids, now they're very complex, but it's not only about the construction skills, it's much more than that. But I think it would take us a long, long, long time, but eventually we might be able to make or most of it. The problem with the replica of the Great Pyramid of Egypt is that every single block is different dimension. This is not how we think. Our concept is make a factory who will be producing millions of blocks of same size, and then you start building your objects. Here, the Giza Plateau, they have all different sizes of the blocks. The same thing goes for Mexico or Peru or China or other pyramids. And in Bosnia, we have something even more intriguing. We have artificially made concrete blocks. concrete, which is much better quality than what we can make today. Our concretes today have hardness from 20 to 60 megapascals, 60 the best quality. Bosnian pyramid concrete from 73 to 155 megapascals. So you see how most of the questions to archaeological answers, who, when, how, and why, still require a lot of investigation to be done. Now, why I think we've done the most, thanks to the our project being interdisciplinary scientific project. We have experts in energy phenomena and so on. So to answer that question, how they were able to do it and who were they, I think we still need to fill out those blanks.
It's interesting when I think about these sites, Bosnian Pyramid site and others, and I think about the Aboriginal or Indigenous cultures within Australia. We have over 300 different countries within this continent. And the people in those cultures spent a lot of time, when they paint as though they're in the sky looking down. So when you see an Aboriginal dot painting or line painting, and it's on a two-dimensional canvas, and then it's on a wall, which is, upright. Actually, it really should be displayed on the ground. Not that you'd walk on them, obviously, but but that's how when I think about the energy and how the energy is, you're speaking about sacred geometry and how that works. I always feel like I'm being pulled to a higher viewpoint to perceive that. So, yeah, so I just thought I might share that. And with you've spoken about a few different sites now, the Giza pyramids and so on. When you discovered the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, and there's this enormous complex. There's so many pyramids and tumulus, and the Ravna Tunnel complex underneath. Were you inspired by looking at, because you've seen over 1,500 pyramids around the world, to my understanding. Was there like patterns or correlations from other sites when you found that major pyramid that you thought, okay, I'm going to start following a particular track? Was there some sort of sacred geometry principles that you've seen that would map across from other sites to the Bosnian Pyramid Complex?
You just made several questions. The first one,
As
your
I do.
comment about the original people of Australia. I was there a few times in Australia. I was doing a little research on those people. Let's imagine this scenario. Tens of thousands of years back, we had those people in Australia. And they got visited by other beings telling them, originally, you are not of this world.
Mm.
Ask the question, okay, so where we are from? Well, we will show you the way how you can determine that for yourself.
Mm.
What is the way? You are not only the physical being, there's just one aspect. The other one is your soul. Soul has no limits. If you are able to successfully control the movement of the soul, then you will be able to look for your origin in the sky among the stars. And once you control the movement of your soul, then you should be able to find your original cosmic home. You know how the indigenous people Australia are saying, we've been here for 1,000 generations. But if one generation is 25 years, so 1,000 times 25, that's 25,000 years. However, the new science called the anthropological genetics is talking about original people in Australia being there for 55,000 years. Is it possible that tens of thousands of years back, 50,000, 40,000, they got visited and they taught them how to perform the controlled movement of their soul out of the body and found their home? When the Englishmen came for the first time a few centuries ago to Australia, they found people who didn't care much about their physical appearance or material stuff, because they were much more about the spirituality, the true spirituality. And once you learn how to leave your body in controlled way, then you live in the world with no limits, then you become free. And then you don't care much about your vehicle, about your physical body, and the same goes for very developed spiritual beings in India, for example. The same thing is Australia. So once you learn that, then it can explain easily the art coming from the original people of Australia. Then it was like they were looking from the above, totally different perspective. Now the question about myself and coming to Bosnia, and discovering certain stuff. My life, it seemed that it was led by the invisible hand, showing me pyramids everywhere around the world. My PhD was about the Mayan pyramid, then Chinese pyramids in Peru, Bolivia, Canary, Mauritius, Indonesia, Cambodia, of course, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Belize, Mexico, US, Spain, Italy. So when I came to Bosnia 20 years ago for the first time in this town of Visoko, it was not because of the pyramids. It was for me to visit the local museum. What really caught my attention was this hill. Everybody called it natural hill because it was covered by forest. I could see perfect geometry for triangle faces. We started the project, and I realized that in order to explain the pyramid, archaeology is not enough. It is important, yes, you dig, you find the blocks, you find the tunnels, but then you start watching those relationships between different pyramid summits, between other points of interest, which I mentioned, tumuli, water, and so on. And then you got the straight lines, you got the triangles. Last year, we finally started discovering Fibonacci spirals. And the knowledge that I got from the other locations about the number pi, number phi being incorporated in those structures in Egypt, or China, or Mexico, or Peru, or Stonehenge, megalithic circles. Because the other aspect, astronomical, is becoming extremely important. As you know, places like Stonehenge, they are all about the major astronomical aspects like the, solstice. Some others, they're about equinox. Solstice, it can be summer or winter, June 21st, December 22nd, or equinox, spring, 21st of March, or fall, 23rd of September. So those very important days, the ancients were building those structures so they can show that they do follow the movement of the sun or the sun's shadow. For example, the Kukulkan pyramid in Chichen Itza in Mexico follow the sun. Light and shadow, light and shadow. When you look at the pyramid, it is like a serpent is coming downstairs, and at the end you have a head of serpent. So it's called also Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan. Kukulkan was God, and for them the God was bringing the knowledge, and this serpent was coming down during the equinox. So now you realize, hey, there was a connection between the structures here on the ground what was happening above us, especially the two major cosmic bodies like Sun and Moon, four lunar phases. So you realize that those complexes are not so simple. They're not only about one purpose, about health, let's say, or about religion. No, no, no. There are multifunctional energy machines, and there are like field schools. And I know that in the next episode we will be talking much more about the astronomical aspect, but it is becoming really the next major discovery in Bosnia.
It's interesting too because, as you say, they're working with many things in one action, and also the interplay of light and dark, the shadow,
Yes,
and what is, in what is also visible and what's not visible. So there's
but
an incredible amount there, and like any one of those, you talk about spiritual development as an evolving soul and how to leave our body, find our home star system, view things from a distance, astral travel, and so on and so on. We've touched on many of those things. The shadow work, and the serpent is a big thing for humanity. Most people have absolute terror of snakes. Not me. I love them. But yeah, it brings up a lot, and then of course then we start going into the fact that we're talking about you know um, a feathered serpent and things like this at times, and we're starting to talk about a flying serpent and many different things that we to delve within the self about, as much as that which is reflected to us about our world. It's extraordinary. I mean, I could talk for hours with you about these things, but I've got to stay on track, don't I? So that's fascinating. Okay, so now, the next question I have, you have spoken, touched on this to some degree, speaking about the flower of life and such that has and the multiple Fibonacci spirals that are evident and present within uh, the Bosnian Pyramid Complex. So, and you've also spoken initially about the straight lines and edges. So we've got two different things going on here. Just for those who are not familiar necessarily with sacred geometry in detail, we've got the masculine principles, which, to my understanding, we start with the Platonic solids, as you've started to speak to, and also then we go into we've got the feminine side of things, flower of life, circles. You can't build with a circle, yet the Platonic solids, when they're constructed into architecture, start to they are all within the flower of life as far as sacred geometry drawings. If you were going to draw it on a two-dimensional plane, you'd be able to find all those shapes inside the flower of life.
mhm.
Now, so what we've got then is an interplay of masculine and feminine energies going on there. And also, like sacred sites around the world. So I'll just weave in a couple of other elements here. Um, One very famous ley line in the world is the Michael and Mary ley line. The Michael ley line. There's a lot of Mary Magdalene sites along that. And then, so where does the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun fit in terms of ley lines? See, I would see a ley line as a pranic tube or a meridian in the human energetic anatomy, in the etheric body, or what I would call, the plumbing and the wiring, which brings energy through from external energies to and from other people, from the stars, from our soul, from up from the earth, food, everything. It's all connected in that way. We get energy. And then these sites are often built on vortex points. Now, the vortex points you could consider, like when people go for acupuncture, they have small meridians, and they have small meridians and small chakras, tiny chakras, and then they get bigger until you've got your major plexus sites of the personal chakras, and they're acting as like they're pulling and pushing energy in and out of our individual vehicles. Yet everything's all connected. So, and you've spoken in previous interviews about how the Bosnian side is actually active, that it creates a scalar field, it's measurable, it's been seen, photographed, and so on. So could you speak to a little bit about some of those concepts, like, again, the flower of life, how the masculine and feminine interplay, and also perhaps perfect nesting as a sacred geometry concept with that, please?
You are right that you are bringing the different forms of energy. Sometimes we do call them male and female, masculine and feminine energy. And what is the connection to different shapes, to different elements of sacred geometry? Or is there any connection? Well, we can hear a lot about different shapes being connected, for example, to female energy. It can be circular, it can be a dome. And male energy, for example, obelisks. In the case of the Bosnian pyramids, what we do know, or better to say, feel, the Bosnian pyramid of the sun is the male energy. It's powerful, strong energy. The moon pyramid is the female. And my personal experience, back in 2005-6, when I started the project, I was working mostly on the sun pyramid. A lot of media, a lot of attention, a lot of visitors, and I felt like I was on the top of the world. When CNN at that time, 20 years ago, CNN was something different than today. The biggest cable TV came, during the interviews, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, BBC, ZDF, Rai, and so on. They're coming. I feel, hey, we have the biggest discovery, we have the biggest pyramids, we have the most powerful. That was the male energy. It gives you self-confidence, it gives you strength. And then the Bosnian cultural establishment who was against the project, they changed the law and claimed that the Sun Pyramid becomes protected area. Not because of the pyramid, but because of very small, neglected medieval fortress. So we were not able to dig there anymore. We had to move to another one, the Moon Pyramid. Also huge, sun 365 meters, moon 190, Egyptian 146. So we went to the moon pyramid, a different energy. Next couple of years, it was mostly about the emotions, about sensations, about totally different energy. So when I started hearing sensitive people who would come to the sites telling me, this is perfect example of male and this is female energy. And then I was thinking, why did I name them at the very beginning, sun and the moon? Well, obviously, that was one of the reasons, Sometimes you do stuff because it is somewhere in your genes, in your blood. Maybe you're not consciously aware, but I did, I would say, the proper names for those pyramids. So, sun and the moon, male and female, yes, I think there is a big connection between the type of the energy. Maybe this energy is not measurable, but it can be felt. We live in the time when we lost teachers long time ago. They don't teach us about feeling the energy, about recognizing different types of the energy. We need teachers who's going to teach their kids. We need teachers who's going to teach parents how to feel the energy, how to see the energy, how to see the colors of the energy, how to, measure the strength of the energy, and so on and so forth. Of course, you have downwards who can find some energy important points. We can find positive and negative energy. But this was something, the ability that we all had. Even today we have it. They don't teach us in general, as general public, to develop those abilities. Now, the next question was about the ley lines. Ley lines is the concept that under the ground there are invisible energy lines that can affect what's going on above the ground. And there is a way to amplify this underground energy. About the source of this energy, it's hard to say. The thoughts are divided. Some people are saying this probably it's coming from the universe, the cosmic rays going to the underground, and then they create those lines or something else. But is it possible that such lines exist? Of course, it is possible. They don't teach us about them in schools. Also, they don't teach us about different energy lines like Hartmann lines that create Hartmann grids. Every 2 by 2.5 meters, those lines intersect, and they make Hartmann intersections. If you have a bed above Hartmann intersection, you're not going to sleep well. You're going to get in the morning very tired. Eventually, you're going to get sick. So you better move that bed. And then you have Curry's lines and Curry's intersection. Then you have Schneider's lines. So a lot of energy movement under the ground, and unfortunately, we don't have proper instruments to discover them and to investigate them. So right now, we simply rely on skilled dowsers who can locate those lines. So dowsers are not there only to find underground water flows, but also different energy lines. So going back to ley lines, this phenomenon is mostly investigated in the United Kingdom, or to be more precise, in England, where a lot of churches have been discovered sitting on the ley lines. However, knowing the history of the churches, we know that those churches were built exactly the same place where the previous megalithic site was located. So what they would do, they would destroy the megalithic site, they would reuse the stone, building the churches. And then the previous megalithic site was built even on the place of even older, powerful, in most cases, paganic temples or different sites. So it seems as we go in the past, the first one who marked the area, they knew exactly where to build their structures because they were energetically looking very potential places. And you are right about this. And Michael's line, you know, you can see the straight line going from the eastern part of England south, and then even crossing the channel, going to France, where the churches with the same name had been built. Obviously, somebody a few hundred years back knew why they were building there and why they were naming the such names. So ley lines. Do we have this phenomenon here in the Central Balkan region? Yes. We do have a map with the ley lines of, Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia. In our case, most of those ley lines, they are straight lines going north-south, east-west, and even diagonal. And most of them are intersecting. You know where? The town of Visoko, where the pyramids are located. The question is, how did they know? And now we are coming to your third question about the energy beam and the scale fields. So the ancient builders knew exactly where they locate their structures because the pyramids amplify the energy. Though the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, we have a huge iron plate or iron ore. Iron generates electromagnetic field. The pyramid pulls this energy, amplifying it. How do we know? Because we have measured at the base of the pyramid and at the top. the signal is 50 times stronger. The pyramid, as a shape, geometrical shape, amplifies the energy. Secondly, under the pyramid, we have underground water flow. Water moves, it releases negative ions. The pyramid amplifies the concentration of negative ions. How do we know? Because we have measured. There is an instrument called air ion counter that measures concentrations of negative and positive ions. And in the tunnels below the pyramid valley, we have the highest concentrations of negative ions in the world. The next element, under the first water flow, there is another one. So between the two, there is a friction, there is a charge, there is a voltage. When there is a voltage, there is an electrical field, electricity. The pyramid pulls this electrical field, getting it through the network of passageways. They are spiral, and they are going through the top of the pyramid. And guess what? At the very top of the pyramid, we measure energy beam, which is electrical in nature, 28 kilohertz frequency, radius or diameter 4.5 meters. And as it moves up, it expands to 20 meters, 4.5, 20, 4.5, getting stronger and stronger as it moves away from the pyramid. In science, this phenomenon is called the scalar fields or non-Hertzian waves, or simply Tesla's energies. And indeed, our genius mind, Nikola Tesla, 120 years back, was investigating the subtle energy phenomena, those frequencies, and he realized that 28 kilohertz frequency is the ideal to transport the energy, to transport the information, because at this frequency, energy moves quicker than the speed of light. And this is how we learned that first potential purpose of the pyramid energy is the communication device. And there is one more form of the energy. During our excavation process in the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun and in the tunnels, we have discovered a lot of quartz crystal. Now, quartz crystal has the ability to, one, amplify the energy, and two, transform the energy from one form, electromagnetism, which we measure, to another form, ultrasound, which we also measure, through the process known as the piezoelectric effect. Now, 28 kilohertz frequency in ultrasound is, in science, known as the levitation frequency. You see how the ancient builders were manipulating with different forms of the energy, creating multifunctional energy machines. So, archaeology can be very exciting if you have different approach. You're not looking only for the pieces of ceramics or primitive tools, but you open the project for experts from different fields.
So that's interesting because quartz is also the most programmable of crystals. And
You are right. This is the
mm,
third function of the quartz crystal. Today, we live in a society which is based on a silicon, computers, the computer chips, silicon, silicium. However, ability of quartz crystal to store the information, to memorize, is hundreds of thousands times bigger than the silicon-based economy. And you are totally right. The future of humanity's civilization to store and manipulate the information is the quartz crystal.
and I'll just make one little comment before we move on to my last question for this catch up. Yeah, so even when we hear stories about the fall of Atlantis, we hear about crystals being programmed and sent into the earth, storing the information of what went down at that time. And there's plenty of people who have past life memories, channel information, etc., etc., and that's a common theme. And I find that interesting when we're looking at all of these ancient sites that not just the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun is major, and that there is that much quartz there, is a big hint to us, I believe. Uh, but they're everywhere, and that information is being held in these structures. And we can just, also comment on the fact that we've just had the release of all of the information about the tunnels under Giza as well, which we've all had a strong inclination of being there for a very long time, but now they're out. But yes, there's a lot going on with the crystal element of things, which also leads me, is it, in part, it connects to the next question. So we've spoken about the flower of life and the platonic solids, all of the Fibonacci spiral and so on. Within the flower of life, which goes all the way into an eternity or infinity, all the way out and all the way in terms of its macro and microcosm, it's a forever geometry. Within that is contained the tree of life. This is a very interesting structure. If, as I understand it, if we were to, we have trees of life that would map across a flower of life, and there is lines that connect them. It's also called Jacob's ladder. It's in the Kabbalistic tradition, and there are also channeled works that I'm aware of that give what we would traditionally call the sephira, the circles that the lines connect, that we travel up and down that, 3 times to reach enlightenment. They're called sephira, and in other traditions they're called something else, those worlds that we connect to. So this structure has 11 sephira, and one of them is called Darth, and that's not even on the tree of life, it's off the tree of life. It's the bridge that would connect tree of life to tree of life. So from that perspective, and from some of the modality work that I've engaged in and experienced, I would consider that the tree of life is not just a sacred geometry shape, that it's a tool that can be utilized to time travel. I would also, go so far as to say is that this tree of life geometry is far, 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 far beyond what we are educated in the mainstream in terms of a timeline of its existence, and that it very likely comes to us on Earth from our star ancestors, and that it didn't originate here on Earth, and that it in itself is a technology. So, is there a connection with the Tree of Life to the Bosnian Pyramid Complex? What are your thoughts about the Tree of Life? Would you share some insights and, maybe comment a little on some of the things that I've said about that? Yeah, what can you tell us, Dr. Sam?
You mentioned briefly Giza underground structures. You said tunnels, and of course, the Tree of Life is the major question here. So I'll be very brief about the discovery under the Giza. Our friends from Italy, Filippo Corrado and Armando, applied radar SAR tomography to look what is under the Giza pyramids. 5 things they discovered. The first one is in the Great Pyramid of Egypt. There are not 3 chambers, but 5. I think they're right. And the second one, Kefren, there is not 2, but 5 chambers. I think they're right. Number 3, under the pyramids, there are 8 pillars in 2 parallel rows, 648 meters length, of which they are probably right. They connect to the chambers 80 by 80 meters, they are probably right, and 2.3 kilometers below the Giza Plateau, there is something like the whole underground city. I don't know about that. Maybe some few chambers or something like that. But they are saying it's much more than that. Maybe whole of Amenti, where the whole ancient knowledge was stored. When King Thoth came there, thanks to the knowledge, he became immortal. So this is the story about the discovery from which was announced May 15th, 2025. I think it tells us that the pyramids, no matter how monumental are above the ground, they are part of the structure, with majority being under the ground. So the whole concept of pyramids being tombs for the pharaohs, the resting place for one dead body, becomes now with no sense. Now, the second question about the tree of life, the way I see it, the idea that tree actually represents 2 dimensions with a very complex root system. They represent our material aspect, the one that is connected to the earth. And then going up to the sky, which should be our spiritual aspect. So 2 aspects combine in the tree of life. So you did mention a couple of times the Platonic solid. One of them, dodecahedron, which is based on pentagrams, basically is showing also connection between 2 dimensions. The first one, you have 4 elements. You have, of course, earth and fire and water and air, wind, and you have the 5th element, the invisible one, ether. So all of a sudden, everywhere around us, we can see the symbolism that connect 2 dimensions: visible, invisible, consciousness, subconscious, light and dark, good and evil, and so on. So the tree of life for me is part of this philosophical concept that bridge 2 dimensions. Unfortunately, majority of the people today live only in one, in materialistic world, which is based on consumerism, which started, of course, in the US and then spread all around the planet. But this is not us. It can be up to a certain percentage. Main dominant part should be about our spirituality, should be about our awareness that we are souls, and soul has its own intelligence, its own senses, spiritual senses, and its own freedom. Once you become truly spiritual, once you start realizing the meanings of all this symbolism around us and importance of different geometrical shapes and how they affect the energy, how they amplify the energy, then you are getting to the point that, what is your really purpose in this life, why we are here, what is our mission, and how to spiritually progress.
Which requires us to time travel. Well, certainly dimensionally travel, expand ourselves. Yes, very good, Dr. Sam. Good to finish on a giggle. Always a pleasure, and I always leave with so much more to consider every time we have a conversation. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you for our next great adventure.
Thanks a lot.